What was once called a conspiracy theory but is now known as true today.
CIA putting LSD in the water supply. Except it was only a handful of extremely small, less than 800 pop, towns in the American Southwest, and the outcome was not, we have a mind control serum, but instead, that deeply troubled a lot of rural elderly people, who had no idea what was happening to them.
Giving someone psychedelics without them having any idea is so cruel. That shit can be a nightmare when it goes bad.
Especially acid. It lasts so long and feels even longer when you're in it. Would be horrible tripping for so long with no foresight/idea of what was happening.
Oh my, can you imagine thinking, I'm not feeling too good. Gonna get a glass of water and see if that helps.
Netflix marketing team releases memes about shows to give off the appearance that everyone is watching said show. Since people have FOMO, they watch the shows to understand the memes until everyone eventually does watch it.
The Bird Box challenge reeked of this to me, but if it works, it works. Because the thing is, even if it's transparent, people who make fun of it or participate ironically are still drawing attention to it. No such thing as bad publicity, right?
Harvey Weinstein assaults many upcoming Hollywood stars was such an open secret it was constantly referenced in media way before the #MeToo movement.
Hillsborough disaster in England 1989. Bad crowd management at a football match by the police. Overcrowding lead to a crush with 97 dead and 766 injured. The police covered up their responsibility and blamed the fans until a second report in 2016 held the police responsible.
The UK not cleaning up properly after their nuclear tests in Australia.
I read a pretty good interview with an indigenous guy who saw a test. It was really upsetting. They were so awed by the explosion. And then they ran into a load of dead kangaroos. They thought the gods had blessed them with food. But after eating the kangaroos, they fell victim to radiation poisoning. I don't know if any studies have been done about cancer and birth defect rates in those communities, but I can only assume it was horrible.
Tuskegee Syphilis Study. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service conducted a study on the natural progression of untreated syphilis in rural African American men in Alabama under the guise of free health care, without their informed consent. The men were not told they had syphilis, nor were they treated for it even after penicillin became the standard treatment in 1947. I work in clinical research, and the Tuskegee experiment is the first example they use of how not to do medical research in every research ethics training course.
This should be required learning in history class, along with the Tulsa Massacre of 1921. A lot of people grow up clueless about race relations in the U.S. aside from slavery and a very sanitized version of the civil rights movement.
Abuse of children was being covered up by the Catholic Church. Or if you want something lighter, gorillas used to be cryptids and were not a properly recognized species until 1902.
The FBI sent a letter to Martin Luther King Jr. telling him he should kill himself. Happy Black History, folks.
That the government is listening/spying on us.
You can do pretty much anything if you call it the Patriot Act. What kind of monster would vote against that?
MK Ultra. Basically, they were doing a bunch of experiments using various devices, drugs, and psychological tactics to try to determine if mind control is real in any way. I believe the results were mixed, to say the least. Like, one story I know of is one test subject of MK Ultra merely got his beliefs torn down by an interrogator, and went on to become the Unabomber.
He didn't just get his beliefs torn down. He was routinely mentally and emotionally abused in that program, for hours at a time. We're talking about domestic torture on a university campus. The LSD was just an instrument they were hoping could speed up the process of tearing down a person and turning them into an unthinking military drone. Problem is, hallucinogenic drugs don't help people become mindless order-taking killers like they were hoping for. It rather made them indifferent to organized institutions and made them feel more connected to people at a human level. So when the results weren't going the direction they thought, they doubled down on the abuse until it was over. So you have an incredibly smart guy like Ted, who sees the same things so many countless others see when they have these big trips, that post-industrial revolution society has in fact ruined the planet and caused mass extinction events, and altered ourselves to an incredible degree, and that there's an urge to connect with all living people. And when you go through countless hours or the kind of torture he endured, you can see why it's easy to lose hope for change, and to resort to extremes because it seems the only way to bring attention to your story. I'm not justifying him or what he did, but the more we learn about how sick our society has gotten, how generational abuse has ruined us, how society is crushing us, the easier it is to see why he did it.
The Nazis murdering Jews, Roma, etc. At the start of the war and much of the way through it, no one believed that they could have been doing such a monstrous thing, and certainly not in such an industrialized manner.
Epstein's private Bucking Island.
And yet cameras outside his cell were non-functional when he went bye-bye. Can't be ruining the lives of wealthy bookers.
The most obvious cover-up in history, and nobody seems to give a crap. Cameras stopped working / malfunctioned. Guard fell asleep and forgot to do his routine checks. Committed suicide, and yet had damage to the neck consistent with being strangled, killed, and then hung himself.
The most shocking to me is the CIA infecting people in South America with syphilis.
The fact that Japanese citizens had disappeared because North Korea had kidnapped them. One of the victims was 13 when she was kidnapped. Her dad devoted the rest of his life to reunite with his daughter, but he passed away a few years ago without ever getting the chance to see her again. His passing was pretty big news at the time. The kidnappings are still an ongoing issue since some of the victims are believed to be alive in North Korea.
Inflation during pandemic was price gouging essentially and had very little to do with supply chains.